the thing that was crazy about the riots was the disinformation that and how quickly that came in. It was amazing how quickly that came in. I've never seen it. It was like they were ready, waiting.
Oh yeah. You know they were.
Yeah.
I mean, I realized that Twitter is, like with the UFO topic, why is there UFO Twitter, but there's not UFO Facebook and there's not UFO Instagram or TikTok?
Right.
It's because Twitter's just as a medium, like the way that it's designed is just perfect for disinformation, and it's perfect for those kind of like, we'll call them operations, because that's essentially, people are planning it and hitting it that way. And so it's like really just the dynamics of use on Twitter is just perfect for running that stuff.
Yeah, it's a wonderful trigger pool.
Yeah, because there's no, it was like on Instagram, you can't share really. You can share the stories, but it's got like a weird Facebook same way. It's all kind of closed off. But Twitter's just like free for all, and you just hit repost and it goes out, and like short enough to just be like memetically primed, like just hit those like little brain buttons,
and too short to really foster any kind of in-length conversation analysis. Like it's just not there. It's like everything's like you're limited to what you can say, how many characters you can say it in, and because of the way it's set up, getting into a thread is also complicated and not really. I mean, you can get into an argument, a long thread argument with somebody, but there's not many people that get exposed to it except the person you're arguing with.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It doesn't get a lot of exposure.
Yep.
But the crazy thing with this was it was fast, and the people that were propagating it were much more powerful than usual in some ways. Like normally this stuff sort of trickles up, doesn't it? Normally, so there'll be some mad person on Twitter will go, "Oh, it's this," and then it will trickle up gradually, and then hit the mainstream. This came from the mainstream down, or not the mainstream, but the people in power down, which is
right.
That's what made it kind of interesting. So you had like an actual MP, Nigel Farage, in this country.
Right.
Sort of not saying, "Oh, this is what happened," but sort of saying enough to spark something. And then you had popular kind of right-wing commentators reposting a lie about because what happened was a bunch of kids got killed by a madman, essentially, and who it turns out wasn't from Islam. It wasn't a Muslim. Had nothing to do with
exactly
Islam at all. He was actually born in England, lived in Wales, Christian parents, so it was like, but all they needed to do was change that tiny little thing, just put a fake name on him, and then that was the spark that lit the fuse. And it all felt very, I don't know, maybe I've been reading too much.
Managed.
It felt like everything was in line perfectly for it to happen, and they were just waiting for an attack like this to happen, and then it just went, and it was quite scary. I've got to be honest with you. Like at one point, everyone in the country was like, "Shit, is it going to hit my town tonight?" Because it was random. It was different towns being, attacked, and then we heard they were coming to my town, Brighton, which is the most liberal town in England, pretty much, alongside Bristol, and it really galvanized me a lot. I was, we went to the counter protest, but only 7 of them turned up in the end, and there was about 2,000-3,000 anti-racist protesters there. So that was I think that was like a relieving thing to see for people, because and then in London there was the threat of another riot there as well, and thousands of people turned up as counter protesters. So it was almost like the left woke up a few days later, and it was but it's still scary that something like that can go off like that. And
I mean, the encouraging thing is something like that is big enough that it's not just the left. It's like average, normal, decent people will show up for something like that. And then most of those people probably don't consider themselves Antifa, leftist, or any of those.
No,
they might not even know what that means. Like they're just like, there's some bullshit going on in my town, and it's not going to happen. Like, so you get the centrist, or the not so engaged will show up for something like that. And I'm sure the left bust in people from all over too. Like
I mean, Brighton's like the most left town you can get in England, pretty much. So it was such a weird target from the offset. But they do come here every now and then. They used to have right-wing rallies here one day a year. I can't remember what they were called, but they just turn up. There'd be like, I don't know, 100 of them, and then thousands of counter protesters. So it was like they were just there for a show.
Well, dude, where I live is like that. Like I live in like probably the most leftist town in Oregon, even more than Portland. And Portland's pretty fucking leftist. and we have like, a small group of right-wing people that will show up on Pride Day when we had that go down. Like they're here, but they're not predominant. That's for sure. But they're here and they will show up just to antagonize,
Yeah.
The worrying thing is England, one thing we did do, a lot of people have criticized him for this because we had a new prime minister as well. He'd only been in for like 4 weeks. I felt really sorry for him.
Welcome.
Yeah, that's a trial by fire, that. But one of the things they were doing was really swiftly putting people through court. Yeah, so people were getting convictions the next day, but a lot of people were like, well, hang on a minute. That's also the democratic process being screwed with there.
That's sketchy. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. It's just if you get hustled through court, it's kind of sketchy.
Yeah, I guess the counter argument to that would be it kind of if there's a moral panic going on, it kind of calms that somewhat. But there's always that balance, isn't there? That kind of the scales of kind of what's sort of it's like people argued about the lockdowns, even on the left. This idea that we all kind of happily gave away our kind of civil rights a little bit to for the pandemic and everything, which I agreed with it. I thought it was a good idea to be locked down personally, but a lot of people didn't see it that way, did they? So there's always that kind of scales of liberty, I guess, kind of argument when it comes to stuff like this, and that's been interesting to watch.
Well, when you especially in the beginning of the pandemic, like we didn't know what was happening. We didn't really even clearly know about the virus and what its effects were, or what the virus was, where it came from. There was all these questions, and then like people forget that there was hospitals that were like stacking up bodies because they had nowhere to put them.
Like Italy was terrible. That was
also the fact that the people at the top who organized the lockdowns knew that it was a lab leak. They knew that it was a weaponized
exactly
beast. And so that question then and it's really interesting. This is like, we have such an opportunity for like a rational public discourse, but it's just the crazy factor and just
and that's the thing. The crazy factor showed up and blew up the conversation before it happened.
Yeah,
it's like so like we were saying, there were people who said we need to be locked down. There was people that said we don't need to be locked down, and there was no conversation that happened around it.
Yeah.
And then even like here's the perfect world is we as a civilization or as a society say, okay, we've got this virus that's running rampant and killing people. We don't know what it is. We don't have a vaccine for it. We're not even sure like proper methodology for treating it. We've got people dying. Like we had ventilators. We were running out of ventilators. There was all these things happening. Nobody knew what was going on. The decent thing to do is we as a community should have come together and say, okay, we're going to distance. We're not going to go out unnecessarily. Grossly, like we're going to do this voluntarily, and that would have been it.
Yeah,
but nobody could do that.
We also
in
that perfect situation, though, we also wouldn't be weaponizing viruses in shady labs and in China.
Exactly. But even if that was the case, if that's what was going on, there was like viruses being weaponized and it escaped. It's like our reaction to that could have been more civilized, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't make me stay in. It's like, okay, like nobody's trying to why don't you just do it on your own? Make that decision for yourself. Because I don't know about you, but I didn't see anybody going to jail for walking around outside.
No, well, I live in Georgia, so that there might as well not have been a pandemic. I mean, I think Athens, or Athens and Atlanta were kind of hard on the lockdown, but anywhere outside of that, at least where I went, like there was no lockdown. There was no.
Yeah, and it's really like large conglomerates of people in closed areas, big cities.
Yeah.
That's where it was probably the worst and the most effective at spreading itself. But yeah, but everybody forgets, like, we as a community could have foregone all of this if we would just like come together as a community and say, okay, we're gonna like distance and we're gonna like chill out for a little while.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? Cool. Yeah. Okay. We're still gonna go get groceries and blah blah blah. Like, that's all it would have taken. But the thing that the pandemic showed is we do not have the ability to do that as a community anymore.
Mm-hmm. No.
We are fucking broken.
Yeah. That's absolutely a big spotlight on that.
Yeah.
We here in Eugene, like, we did kind of have that conversation and everybody agreed. And for the most part, we were okay. We had a group of like 5 people that were showing up at the supermarket at the front doors. And if you were wearing a mask going into the supermarket, they harassed you. And there were like elderly people that I know, like 80-year-olds who were like, had comorbidities, and they were worried, and they should have been worried. And you've got these people like trying to grab their masks off their face when they're just trying to go buy some fucking groceries. So I talked to some people I knew, and I showed up with them, and I had a canister of bear spray on my belt. And I, as I was walking up, they looked at me with a mask and kind of like made a motion towards me. And then I reached over and got my bear spray, and they just backed the fuck up. And I'm like, and I'm going to stand here and let everybody go through. And if I see one of you like grab for a mask, I'm fucking hit you right in the face with this bear spray. And this is like the good bear spray for grizzly bears. Like, you ain't going to recover from this. And they fucked off. They left us alone, because that's all you need. Just like one person saying, nope, not going to happen on my watch.
Yeah. It's a shame. Yeah, the thing that worries me is the UK thing a sort of test bed for what's coming in November? You've got potentially. It doesn't matter who kind of wins, does it, in November? Like,
you're talking about here in the States?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, dude, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's gonna be a mess.
I mean, I'd prefer it not be Trump, mainly because he brings with him, no matter what he says, he brings that prayer breakfast contingent with him, and yeah, I could do without that. But on a bigger level, like Kamala Harris, really, I mean, I lived in California when she was Attorney General. She's nothing to write home about.
Yeah, but if she gets in, what's going to happen? Yeah, I'm not so worried about her policies and stuff. I'm more worried about what the other side does.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that the crazy Trump contingent is as bold and loud as it was in 2016 and even 2020.
Well, they don't have Bannon right now.
They don't have Bannon.
They don't have a lot of their people that were
A whole lot of people went to jail on January 6th.
I thought Bannon was back. Is he not back then?
No, I think he. How many? 4 months? I think he ended up getting. And he probably will get some good behavior time.
Even then, his I think his relationship is a little bit strained. It's really interesting because there's a lot of the different groups that are involved. It's a little bit different. Not quite as weaponized, but I don't know. I mean, they could just be staying quiet, and then we see.
No, I think the alt-right fell apart.
Yeah,
it definitely did. And then you've got people like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, and they're non-existent pretty much nowadays because most of them went to jail.
Yeah,
and they didn't get pardoned, and I think that butthurt them. They're like, we went to jail for you, Trump, and you did fuck all for us. So, yeah. He lost a lot of support. Like, his cult is like running at half speed.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is I immediately started monitoring for QAnon and that kind of stuff, but that seems to have died off as well.
Q came back supposedly, and nobody gave a rat's ass.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting because there'll obviously be something else that will take its place. Maybe it won't be this round, but we'll definitely see that. Again,
Collins Elite.
Yeah, the Collins Elite. They're gonna come in.
I mean, like that thing you posted to us the other day, Ken, when Lou Elizondo apparently is now waving that Collins Elite flag like it's a thing.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what the fuck?
Well, it was interesting last night he was on Coast to Coast last night with George Knapp, and Knapp brought it up using the Collins elite term, right? It basically, like, yeah, you said that and this is one of the segments on the thing. It was a very scripted. I don't know. I was able to suspend my contemporary senses and just kind of like listen to it as if it was like 1995, Coast to Coast, and I was like, this kind of,
which is where it belongs.
Yeah, I'm like, this kind of, I can exist in this UFO world, and I fell asleep listening to them, but the Collins elite thing was brought up, and Elizondo actually made a point to say you can call it whatever you want, but there are extremist Christians in the thing. And so it was interesting because I think with the way that Elizondo is using it, he's using it as a catch-all term that people know for what actually like are the networks of Christian extremism, which we've talked about before. That it's super obvious. I mean, like this was never a surprise. I'm surprised that people are surprised because you like go, it's so prevalent. You can go back and list a ton of different authors and everything. I mean, Jeff Charlotte's book, The Family, outlines some of the like political networks and stuff like that. But then just in public, Chuck Missler, in the UFO topic, Chuck Missler, major evangelical teacher, ran his own institute for training pastors and that kind of stuff, wrote that, was it Alien Dawn or something? I mean, he wrote a book basically that was saying that the UFO topic was demonic, and his original, what he came out of before he was evangelist, he was a executive in a missile contractor company, it was in missile defense,
right?
And those networks, I mean, you see like the Skywatch, which I'm semi-obsessed with, and they've always got like Jerry Boykin on there, who was the head of Delta Force, and they've got, Jerry Boykin's doing events with Morning Star Ministries, which is Rick Joyner, who's very tied into the sort of military intelligence scene. You just list name Gary North, wrote that again, Unholy Spirit was his book on UFOs and that, quoting John Keel, quoting Volay, all the rest of it. So it's just really interesting. And one more point to that too was Tom Horn from Skywatch, again, very connected to these Christian military intelligence, circles. He actually interviewed Redfern because he wanted to get in touch with the Collins elite. And Redfern had actually been on a couple of their documentaries, or one of their documentaries at least, had gone to, there was a event in Roswell, New Mexico, which was put on by, that had people from the Skywatch crew and the charismatic Christian anti-cult, anti-supernatural groups. And so Tom Horn interviews Redfern, and he's kind of pinging him to get like a contact. And Redfern is hemming and hawing and saying like, they contact me, I don't contact them. And, basically like the more Tom Horn pressed, and I don't think that Redfern thought it was going to get picked up the way it got picked up by the people who picked it up, and you can't, I mean, this guy's a televangelist, like charismatic preacher. You're not going to squeeze your way out of that. So Horn just kept pressing him. And finally Horn realized he wasn't going to get anywhere, but also started to smell a little bit of like, I don't think this is real.
Yeah, there's no there there.
Yeah, there's no there there. There's a reason that you're not even making an attempt to like get me in contact.
You got nobody to contact, dude.
Yeah. Well, and so Horn actually then he taps his network, right? So like Redfern, I'm sure he had contact with somebody who was telling him stuff. And then, but that's different than Tom Horn, like literally having like family barbecues with the head of Delta Force. You know what I mean? So like Tom Horn taps his network, and he's like, hey, has anybody ever heard of this stuff? And no one that he contacted had heard of the term Collins elite at all.
Surprise.
No information. And the thing is, like, again, Tom Horn's network is like the people who would be the Collins elite. If the Collins elite as a thing existed, and it wasn't just a sort of blanket term for Christian extremism in the Pentagon, which the prayer breakfast, you mentioned it earlier, right?
Yeah.
The prayer breakfast, like, come on, like there's that, there was like a recruiting video that they put out, which was all people in the military talking about, how Jesus saves them from guilt. and stuff like that. I mean, like it's just so like it's so prevalent. And again, Jeff Charlotte's research into Christian right networks in the US is right there. There's names, like you can find them. But then that's the problem I've always had with this Collins Elite thing. No names are named. Like there's never like somebody who's actually doing this stuff where you
because there's no names to name.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are some people that he talks about, but it's all that like it's the type of research that I absolutely hate, and I think most serious researchers. I mean, this is just
Well, put air quotes on research.
Yeah, research, but it's the it's the we're going to get a bunch of facts together, and then we're going to string a narrative through it.
Yeah,
and in this topic.
And this sounds like my fiction writing process, but okay, go ahead.
I mean, that's what it is.
It is, yeah.
Writing process.
I mean, I learned it from the conspiracy theorists. So, I mean, I went, oh, that's how it's done. Okay, I'm going to write a story like that. I mean, Bob Wilson did it.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly. It's the Illuminatus
it goes way
trilogy.
back. It's the Illuminatus trilogy. It's the same thing. It's like, or Umberto Eco with the stuff that he does. It's like it's if you can figure it out. Because there's no book written about how to write conspiracy stuff, but if you figure it out, you're like, oh, I can write anything. This is really cool. I can tie anything to anything.
And that's become the major like way of research now. I mean, you see all these things where it's like these hit pieces, and it's like this person knew this person, or this person may have had lunch with this person, and they were part of this group.
Well, because what they're doing is they're not trying to write the truth. They're trying to write something that will be catchy enough to get clicks.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
and sell books, maybe, but mostly clicks.
And then here we're seeing where, I mean, I don't know what's going on with Elizondo, but like he has airtime. He had positions in the military and the intelligence circles.
Right.
And so it behooves us
but it's questionable how much.
Yeah, and that takes like serious like questions, but then we get this like it's all filled up now with this bullshit, and like the Collins Elite, I mean, like that came out, like Redfern's selling books now. Now that Elizondo mentioned that, like I've seen so many people being like, what is this? There was a Reddit thread that was like, who is this Collins Elite? And like Diana Pasulka is mentioned. Like, oh, this isn't, and I'm just like, this is not like, like you're mentioning folks that I know, and like this, we're not talking about the Collins Elite, I mean, that's not how this goes. So it's really unfortunate because again, there are real networks of power. Jeff Charlotte's work, his scholarship has shown, like these lines that go back through, but nobody's naming names, and it's like, if you're going to do this, if you're going to say this exists and it's blocking things, then you need to, and I think it is a serious problem. I mean, they've, Ed Mays complained about it with the Stargate program, and the remote viewing program had issues with it. Obviously, if it's to the point where you have something like the UFO topic, which is being blocked from research or being misguided through research, then it's having an effect on it's having an effect on policy. It's having an effect on what we do. It's having an effect on research grants, and that's not good. I mean, that's really not good to have. It's not against like Christianity, but this form of extremism, which the messaging is the same as Al Qaeda. I mean, you can map out the messaging that the Christian extremist fundamentalist, groups are putting out, and it's very similar to Al Qaeda. They have that whole, holy warrior and warrior for God, which Jerry Boykin has. Warrior Soul is one of his books. It's all about like this idea of like the bride of Christ arising, and all this stuff with the UFO topic goes back to some really shady right-wing stuff. Yeah, with a healing revival in the 1946 it started, but 47 it really kicked off, and journalists were embedded with the healing revival. This is where Oral Roberts and a lot of the televangelists come out of, and they were embedded with the healing revival, and people would go in to be healed, right? And the journalists are sitting there and nobody's getting healed. They're getting hauled back out in wheelchairs, but the way that it's being presented is these massive healings are going on, and and all of that. And it was the beginning of kind of like a massive influx of niche publications by these different ministries that were putting this stuff out, and that was happening just as Kenneth Arnold has his thing and flying saucers happen, and 47 was a huge wave of UFOs. And so nobody was believing the media was like, this is crap. Like we can see this person went in a wheelchair, came out in a wheelchair. There was no healing. There were some people that would come back again and again and again. So they'd be wheeled in a wheelchair, wheeled out in a wheelchair, next town, same person, wheelchair. So and the media was reporting this. So what could you do with that message? How do you say there's a healing revival, this end times moment and stuff? Azusa Street was in 1906 was the beginning of Pentecostalism. So 1946 was 40 years in the desert. Moses, we're hitting the Holy Land.
Isn't this times. The Amazing Randy kind of came out of that healing revival thing, didn't he? Eventually, he
later. I mean, he's like 70s, So but he was like Peter Popoff and stuff like that, like some of the evangelists with the healing. Which again, those evangelists that he was calling out did go back to this healing revival. But the thing was that they didn't have anything to, they couldn't show the healings. But now there's UFOs, right? And so they were framing it early on as oh my gosh, these are signs in heaven, signs and wonders, right? Like, and they were writing about it. Gordon Lindsay, who was Oral Roberts, he was an associate of Oral Roberts, and this other guy, William Branham, started writing about UFOs as angels, and this idea that this was the angelic host was coming back, and it was a sign of the end times. But then what happened was the contactees. And so they were able, when it was just stuff in the sky, you could say whatever, and it was signs and wonders and whatever. But then the contactees came out, and for whatever reason, I think Franklin Hall was his name. He was a Texas evangelist, part of this healing revival circle.
Yeah.
He decided to have Truman Bethram come to one of his revivals and talk. And so Truman Bethram's up there talking about what the space people thought of Jesus and all this other stuff, because a lot of, there's a really heavy Christian theosophical bent to a lot of the early contactees.
Yeah, the space people often claim Jesus is one of their own.
Yeah, Ashtar. Yeah, right? Ashtar says, like, if you all were like Jesus, we would be, we would be friends, kind of. And so, but what happened was Bethram talks, and these fundamentalists were like, that's not Jesus. What are you talking about? Like, this isn't good. And so immediately it pivots to these are demons, right? And that's literally the birth of the demonic hypothesis, which then you see in this Collins elite myth kind of thing, right? Like is encapsulated in that. And a lot of the groups, again, Chuck Missler and all of these people, Tom Horn and that, like, pick up that narrative and carry it forward. And it has a birthplace. We can see it. We can see exactly the narrative stream of where it goes, and we can see how it enters politics. These revivals, huge money. The Kardashian family was actually funding some of this. Like pre the Kardashians that we know, back when they were, I believe, Turkish refugees.
Armenian,
Armenian refugees. Yeah. So like they, they were funding these revivals in that, and it has ties to right-wing neo-Nazi groups. They were building in Canada. They were building, breakaway civilization style orphanages to train the warriors of Christ. And it's really, the messaging is very similar to what we see with like Rick Joyner and Morningstar Ministries, who again is connected to military people and intelligence people. So it's really the history is there. It's right there. You can see it. It's public. It's out in the open, but this Collins elite thing is just like distracting everyone from the fact that, hey, when you turn on the Kardashians on TV, that family was paying right-wing neo-Nazi groups in, the 30s and 40s to do these revivals that were supposed to bring in the end times, and like, had literally paid for orphanage. I mean, think about that. They funded orphanages to get orphans in there that they could brainwash and train as an army for Christ.
Yeah.
That's disturbing. They had airstrips. The one in Canada had airstrips. I think there was one in California too. They had airstrips.
Most people don't realize, like, if you look at Christian fundamentalism, if you even just go back to the 60s and the 70s, they're very, very tied in and linked to anti-communism.
Exactly.
Like they're very like the whole the whole spiel. Like a lot of those people, like, as far as they're concerned, there's like these evils in the world, and communism is one of them. And believe it or not, oddly enough, that's still a conversation, because you see that popping up in the right wing a lot. The politicians say, "Oh, they're a communist. They're a communist." Like, it's like, dude, that conversation died off in the 60s. You know,
socialist as well. Socialist.
Yeah, socialist, communist. And if you look back at like the history of fundamentalism, this makes sense to me. So look at what, just one example. Look at what the Air Force was concerned about when they started seeding information to find out where something they told somebody would go, so they could like map out the networks of the contactee culture. They were worried that the Space Brothers sounded too much like a fucking communist.
Yeah.
That's what they were really worried about.
Yeah.
From that, you can track back to Benowitz.
Yeah.
You can track back to Doty. You can track back to all this stuff, but it all eventually ties into anti-communism, which is allied on the military side to at least adjacent to the things that were going on in fundamentalism, because they were anti-communism. They were, John Birch Society.
Yeah.
Like all of that was like very heavily, and still is. It's just that like it's not a big of a conversation, but it's still in their conversation as far as they're concerned. It's still there.
They were being actively run. I mean, there's a book called Rockefeller and the Age of Oil, and it talks about how the missionary groups that were going down to South America were doing demographic studies for Standard Oil and that to basically like, this is, you send a missionary in, right? You get the free language learning. They go in there, they're the perfect operative, and they do the demographics for the area. They don't even have to know. They're doing it for Jesus, and they get the demographics for the area. They find out who the leaders are. They find out whatever, and then missionary leaves, and then surprise! Like a month later, there's a paramilitary group, and they're cleaning out the leaders, and moving people out so that Standard Oil or Chiquita Banana or whoever. I mean, Chiquita's still. I think there was a recent story where they're still using paramilitary groups to control their land holdings and that.
Oh yeah.
And again, this is what bothers me about this Collins Elite thing. It's a cartoon. And it's like, if we're going to talk about this stuff, look at the reality of this. It's really nasty, Billy Graham's another great example. He was set up as an anti-communist propaganda guy. The pastor to the presidents, right? Like, he's just, he's sharing Jesus with the presidents. Like, come on. Like that's stupid. Like, this guy's obviously an intel asset, like, and has been. You look at Franklin Graham's the political influence they have. You start pulling in tens of thousands of people into a revival. They're not going to let that sit, right? That's not you were talking about the riots in the UK, right? Like, you bring 10,000 people into an auditorium and you have the ability to do that. You are going to have a conversation with somebody that tells you what you can do and what you can't do. And, and if you're willing, then you're going to also shape that into your.
Or you could be a useful idiot.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you've got people that are like, I'm just spreading the word of Christ, and like, so if you parse that, the word of Christ in the fundamentalist view is pro capitalism. Anti-communism. It's all John Birch shit. It's like all the stuff that the prayer breakfast stands for is all John Birch type shit. It's all the same thing, and so they're on the same page anyway. So they probably get the visit, and they're probably going, "Hey, thanks, cool, we're on board. We're on the same page."
That's exactly. Well, and if you go back to this revival too, there's an interesting. I forget what it's a YouTube. Maybe we can put the links in the thing or something. There's a YouTube channel that goes into this history, and they've done a really great job. It was a guy who was in the William Branham group. His parents or his grandparents actually knew William Branham, and he started to see like, ooh, there's some racist elements here. Like, there's some questionable stuff here, And so he removed himself, but because he had this insider's view, he's gone back to kind of work his own, get that exercise, that influence out of himself. And he's done this amazing history. I guess it's a documentary. It's one of those YouTube documentary kind of things, but the history of this right-wing politics and these charismatic groups, and going into just like nuanced detail of that growth. And the John Birch Society, and the revivalists and the, you know, and Billy Graham and all them, like they grew up out of the same thing,
all on the same page.
Yeah, it's the same people, the same money, the same people that were trying to bring back the Klan in like the, you know, in the 40s and 50s.
Yep.
And that were the ones that were funding these revivals. I mean, they're just like, it's lockstep parallel.
That's the other, and that's it. You brought that up, David. The other thing that is shocking, as I've mentioned a few times, it's not news, but my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was from the South and was like very, very, very fundamentalist, and tried to like recruit the rest of the family to join her in the war against the devil. Thankfully, it never happened. But you know, I've been in the church with people like Estes Perkle preaching, and he referred to black people, which there wasn't a black fucking person in the congregation. He referred to black people as the Hamites.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly.
And he said, like, I have nothing against black people. It's just that black people and the Hamites and the white people are not supposed to mix.
Right.
Like, so these people are like right on the verge, if not like they're actually into all the way, but not admitting that they're Christian identity people.
Right.
This all of this stuff is mashed together, and everybody's trying to say, oh, it's not that. It's not that. No, it's an agenda, and it has a bunch of points, and those points are racism, separatism. If you look at like most of these people that come from this fundamentalist background, they're like borderline paramilitary.
Yeah.
It's all very weird, but like when I see all this stuff popping up in the public, it's like none of this is new. It's just now emerging in the last 10 years, strongly emerging into the mainstream, but it's always been there.
Yeah.
The Reagan administration, it was there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's
the Nixon administration, it was there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the you know, and it's really been amped up by social media and by the spread of that, you know, and I mean the fact that they use frame jacking consistently. I mean, one of the things that these groups are very, very attuned to is taking trends that are popular and then inserting their own stuff, right? I mean, you think of the Jesus Freak movement that the Billy Graham Evangelical Association promoted, right?
Yeah.
They just tried to frame jack the hippies and reframe it as a Christian thing, you know, and they just, you know, it's trend hopping. I saw when my brother was working with the 700 Club folks and Pat Robertson and that, and the Baptist organizations, and doing events for them. You know, you'd have like Korn would be popular, and then you would have the Christian equivalent of Korn, which was just them ripping off Korn but putting Christian lyrics on it.
Striper.
Yeah. Hair metal, yeah. You know, it's just, and that's a very aware thing that they do. Is this is trending right now? Well, we're going to evangelize, you know, and it's like,
which is exactly what we're seeing with the UAP thing. It's getting hijacked. It's unfortunately getting hijacked with the narrative that I saw, like, when was it, 2010 or whenever Redfern's book came out, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to get popular. I hope to God this doesn't, but I think it's going to. It's like, it's only because it felt like the right thing at the right time. It feels like something Beckley would have come up with, right?
Well, I'm sure he did. I'm sure that. Well, he did. He actually had an Angels. There's one of his. So he had UFO Review, right, which is just a wonderful like advertorial, like magazine. But he had another one that was I don't know if it was called like Light or something like that, but like it was all angels.
Remember that one?
It was
it?
Yeah, it was all angels, and like but then like a little bit of UFO, but it was a lot of Fatima and like Marian apparitions and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I saw that like 20 years ago. Like Fatima got really big all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Fatima, but it it was like this whole thing, like where everybody was like into that all of a sudden, and through that you get like this strong Catholic right-wing narrative, because like the people that usually wanted to talk about Fatima online were usually people that were either Opus Dei or a step away from being Opus Dei, you know, and I can recognize these people because I had some people on the other side of my family who were not Protestant but Catholic, and they were, you know, I have a cousin that became a nun, and uncle that became a priest, and like I know this like weird right wing Catholic thing too, unfortunately, and it's like it's really weird. Again, it's anti-communist.
Yeah.
It's like it's the same thing as the fundamentalists, only it's the Catholic version.
Yeah,
it honestly is.
It's interesting because even the New Age seems to be doing that as well. Again, there seems to be like a push, doesn't there? A push
now it's the New Age. Like the New Age got hijacked like 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, but it seems to be now. I mean, the New Age, if you look at it, has always had roots in the right wing, especially if you look back to theosophy and
depending on what part of it. Yeah.
If you look back to like the Orientalization of certain things, like especially
in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, like it went kind of lefty.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually going to talk about that because I was listening to a podcast. I won't drop names because I don't want to people to get the wrong idea. But I was listening to two people very well known to the three of us have a conversation about the state of the occult on the internet at the moment, and it's almost like there's a particular generation of people that are stuck in that era with magic and the occult where they think that the counterculture almost created magic, if that makes sense. So that it's almost like it took it over and now it's this new version of magic, and now they're very surprised that stuff's being used by the right, and it's like, but that's our thing, and it's like, well, no, it's not. It never was your thing. You borrowed it. Sorry, the more
but we didn't. But dude, we didn't know that. Like,
no, exactly, yeah.
In the days before the internet, which is like when I got involved in the occult, like it was like always lefty.
Mm-hmm.
Like
but I'm saying,
or lefty, or kind of a something that doesn't exist anymore, which is a leftist libertarian thing.
Yeah,
which is, I would have called myself in the 90s. I wouldn't call myself that now. I don't want that name near me, libertarian. But like what it was in the 90s was something different than it is now.
Yeah. It's like Bob Wilson was that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even he said, I don't want to be called a libertarian because I don't hate poor people that much.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I get that. Like,
but what's interesting is that there's these people still that are stuck in this narrative that, since then we've had the internet and we've had all this research and we've had all these exposés and we've seen research. Yeah, well, no, I mean actual research. Like, we've seen.
No, I know. I just love. I just like do. I like to do that kind of research.
Air quotes. Yeah. But we've had plenty of time to self-flagellate about the roots of the occult. Yet there's this entire generation that refuses to see it outside that kind of parameter of the counterculture still. And I wonder if that's a mistake. If that's something that maybe they should be a bit more aware, because at the moment what I'm seeing, especially through what used to be called the New Age, which you'd call, I guess, wellness. Now
it's called wellness.
Yeah, like holistic Gaia type shit, basically.
Well, yoga became this industry.
Oh yeah.
And big that's time. Really where it went south.
Well, you're seeing the other thing you're seeing now. If you go on Instagram, you're seeing this new version of Tantra that's appeared in America mainly, where it's like I've not seen this version before. I've seen lots of other versions of Tantra. I can use the air quotes now, that have appeared in the past. But there's this new version that seems to almost be a bit faith healer-esque, where there's a circle of women lying on the floor, and then there's another woman. I can send you links to this. It's quite funny. But the main healery person sort of goes above and goes, makes this strange noise, and then the women are on the floor having this orgasmic response. But what's interesting was I was looking into those. They're like centers. There's a bunch of them in California, obviously. And what a surprise. But one of them I looked into, and it turns out that the person that runs it, I need to get the name, but the person that runs it is a fundamentalist Christian. And it's
not surprising, because remember when Kabbalah?
Oh yeah.
Like you wore like this like bracelet or something, and Madonna was into it, and I went through that material. I'm like, there's very little Kabbalah in here.
Oh yeah. But what's interesting is it almost feels like the New Age has become a pathway to Christianity.
Yeah,
which is like,
have you not noticed?
Well, I suppose, but it's like
there's a lot of high level people who are like adopting Orthodox Christianity all of a sudden. That came from the New Age and came from the left, and people that came from the left.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
I mean,
not
Russell
even new
Brand's
age
the obvious
people.
example, isn't he? Brand's
Well,
the obvious
Russell
example.
Brand, but like you got other people like Paul Kingsnorth, and even Martin Shaw, of all people, the mythologist who from Devon, who just recently has said, he's how did he say it? He calls Jesus a druid. And he says, I follow the druid, the something druid, the Jerusalem druid, or so. He's got a name for him.
The
but
funniest thing with Brand's thing was hilarious because he was baptized in the UK by another TV celebrity called Bear Grylls. Bear Grylls is like the survivalist
guy who drinks his piss.
Yeah. So he gets baptized by the piss drinker, and then the next day he goes.
There's a soundbite.
The next day he goes onto his channel, his YouTube channel, or whatever he's on now, Rumble, whatever.
I saw that. Yeah.
And he starts talking about a tarot deck. And then the funniest thing was a friend of mine found there's this fundamentalist Christian YouTube channel. The day before his baptism, we're like, brilliant, Russell Brand's on side. And then the next day, he's there with his tarot deck and they're reviewing it, going, what the? No. This isn't Christianity. It's made me laugh so much. But it feels, but it is kind of weird to me that.
Well, the Pathos, there was an article that I can't find anymore, and I wish I could, that was talking about, and I believe it was a neo-pagan writer on Pathos, and they were upset because I guess when you sign up for and I don't know if this is still the case, but at the time when you signed up to have a Pathos, subsite or whatever that is, there were, the fine print was that you couldn't say anything bad about Billy Graham and the Billy Graham Association, Evangelical Association. It was like a list of like the Forever Family Foundation. It was a list of politically active, right-wing Christian groups that you couldn't talk bad about. And it was really interesting because, again, that frame jacking thing, right? So Pathos, and I can't find the article, so this is totally unsourced, just my memory. I could have been dreaming or something, but I'm fairly certain that I actually saw this. But so I mean, they were Pathos, which was a major hub for New Age and neo-pagan and that kind of stuff, Wiccan and that was at the base was essentially a front door to get people to move into these Christian groups. Which again, like I think it's got to be clarified the fact that we're not talking about the Christian faith. We're talking about organizations that have hijacked these religions as a means of political power and social control. I mean, because this is not Christianity. It's not Christianity. Like it's a social group. It's a political organization, and it's these to a certain extent weaponized information and that's being utilized to control the narrative and to force it. I mean, because the other interesting thing on the flip side is, groups like Skywatch or Morningstar Ministries, right? Like if you look at Morningstar Ministries prophetic training material, it's psychic training, right? Like it's just got a different name on it. So like they're literally training people like to use precognition, to use lucid dreaming. There was I forget his name, but one of these televangelist type charismatic evangelist guys, a lot of his whole teaching was on dream messages from God, right? So like, and when you read this stuff, and
Book of Daniel,
what's that?
Book of Daniel.
Yeah, and that's they tie.
That's what Daniel was famous for. Like it was telling the kings what their dreams meant.
Yeah. Exactly. And so they use that narrative, but then how do you train people in that, right? They literally were just using the lucid dreaming.
Lucid dreaming, when you said that, I'm like, it's like Daniel.
You rebrand the stuff and like you sell
some Jungian psychology whipped in there.
Christian version.
Totally. I mean, it really
I'm sure I read recently, wasn't there a Christian version of the Monroe tapes as well? There was some version of
there's they call it the induction technique, sometimes called soaking. That the piece I did, the Satan's Target Your Mind, Supernatural Living in the American Marketplace or something. I wrote that in 2013, and that outlines that specific thing, because they were using binaurals. It was amazing. I was researching this stuff because it was popping up in Walmart, like these just crazy, like, you have the inspirational section, and it's going to have some style of like Joel Osteen and stuff like that. But they had stuff in there that was like literally like an exorcism manual. It was like a Pentecostal exorcism manual. And I'm like, why is this in Walmart? So I started researching it. And, lo and behold, it uncovers this whole network of everything we're talking about. But
binaural beats for exorcism?
Yeah. Well, for attuning yourself, they called it soaking. You would soak in the presence of God. But then when I was listening to this stuff, I'm like, this is isochrotic tones. Like this is, and they called it the supernatural tone. Right. Yeah. Like when we played this, a third tone appeared. I'm like, you're describing binaural and isochronic techniques. Like this is not, but they're selling it as the supernatural tone, and then it would get you in the thing. And what the Satan's Target piece that I did looked at was, when you have this exorcism book next to you, right? And that's priming you with those thoughts. And then you're sitting there soaking in your, supernaturally inspired music. You're being put into a perfect hypnotic situation to suddenly experience demons and experience angels and experience all this stuff, because you're being primed continuously from your email that you get from these ministries, but they're putting it the political way. And really the key piece was this audio, because it puts you in a receptive state. And I was like, this is straight up, mind control kind of stuff that they're implementing on like a really weird, decentralized thing. You go to Walmart, it looks like it's legit authorization.
You're being set up to experience a failed initiation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you have
which is the worst thing that can happen to you.
Yeah, and then you have the people guiding you into the truth. It's really, it's really a kind of devious use of these techniques. And then when I saw the Morning Star Ministry stuff with the prophecy and the prophetic training tools and all that, and again, it was literally, and these are the same people that are talking, they'll have a book out about how the remote viewing program and Joe McMoneagle are demonic and they're summoning demons. So they're obviously reading that material. They'll quote Keel and Vallée, and they'll quote all this stuff. And then on the flip side, they'll have these, inspired teachings about prophecy. And it's literally just a back engineered form of remote viewing or whatever modality, modality. And I'm like, you guys that's devious, and you can't tell, like, my brother worked with the 700 Club, and I've been around those circles, and you honestly can't tell if they know, it's almost like they've convinced themselves, so they don't even see that they're doing this.
Sure.
I highly doubt at the top levels that people are that naive, but they could be.
The most effective salespeople are the people that believe the bullshit they're selling.
Yeah.
They really believe they're doing you a favor by selling you this pile of crap.
Yeah. And weaponized pile of crap. I mean, that was what
weaponized pile of crap in this case. Yeah.
This is a weaponized, like mind hack right here is what's going on.
I've been thinking about this recently. What's the we've kind of identified a grift at the moment, or at least I seem to have identified a grift, which is you start off in the New Age, then you become a conspiracy theorist, then you go to Christ. That's the third.
That seems to be that's the
3-tier plan,
the pipeline.
But what's the next step? And that's what I've been trying to think of at the moment. Like, where do you go after? Because they always have to have a new thing. These people.
Well, you become a soldier for Christ.
You get prophecy, you get your different messages, and an angel comes to you or something, or you get,
you become a very obedient follower of somebody who's like the mid-level person that's like assigned your pastor.
Have you noticed that Peterson's in the conspiracy arc now? It feels like he's never really been New Age. He's more kind of like psychology, conspiracy Christian. That's the path I see.
Really, I always thought he was a sociopath, but
I mean, did you see he had Xena Shrek on his show?
Yeah, he did.
I did. I haven't seen the show yet, but I saw she was on it.
But it's like, wow. I wonder.
I'm like, is she gone? Is she gone the way?
Yeah, yeah.
Did she? I mean, she was doing the Buddhist thing, but was this her moment of coming out as like another Christian convert,
reformed Satanist, reformed Buddhist?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to watch that. It's I just saw it pop up in my feed, and I was I think because
a lot of the people I've noticed that have become, and they always seem to be Orthodox Christian. They don't just go regular Christian. They go Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox Christianity for whatever reason. But those are some of the most conservative political people, but in the Christian communities that I know of. But there always seems to be like this weird thing where they go pagan, Buddhist, Orthodox Christian. I've seen that several times.
Yeah. I've got a friend that says that he's in the OTO, and he always says, "Oh, you know, these people, they become like extreme Thelemites and they run away into Buddhism." It's really strange that that seems to be a pathway for sort of like disenfranchised occultists. They go kind of into Buddhism. Like, it's strange.
Well, I mean, I get it. Like I like got way into Zen because it was it felt better than like arguing with people who's supposed to be your occultists online all the time. I was just like, ugh. It's like everybody just wanted to argue, like, no, that's not the way you do it. I know the right way to do it. And like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got to admit, it is appealing. I mean, you look at some, especially, I mean, for me, I'm really interested in Tantra at the moment. And because it's it's what a lot of magic comes from, you know, so it's
exactly.
I'm just going back to the source and looking
it's like all the benefits of magic without all the idiots attached to it.
Well, that's not true. That's not
true. I was gonna say we're just talking about
but unfortunately, you discover there are Zen idiots. I've met them. So
it's a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Well, no, it's like Bob Wilson used to say, like, you just move from one thing to the next and take that on for a while, learn what you can from it, and move on. Like I had this conversation with Alan Christopher Hyatt. I talked about, like, it seems to me that these occult organizations, the real purpose of them, if you use them correctly, is you move through the organization, get what you need, and move on. And he said, "Oh yeah, literally, that's what it's like. It's there for you to move out of, like to grow out of. Like you're supposed to grow through it and grow out of it. And then there's people that don't, and those are the people that like set themselves up as the middle management, and that's a personality type, and there's nothing you can do for them except like wave goodbye as you leave. You know, like they're going to stay there, and that's what I mean. Those people made it so irritating to be involved in the occult communities that I didn't want to be anymore. So I moved on to Zen for years. And then I started to meet Zen idiots. I'm like, okay, time to move on. And so I just like moved on to do, something with shamanism.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what group you join. There's always people always have this expectation, don't they? That when they come to OTA is a great example of this. Everyone thinks it's going to be like sex orgies every week. And, they've read too much Crowley, or they've read too much writings about Crowley, which is more likely. And so they think that, they're going to join these groups and something's going to happen, but it doesn't. And then they become they become angry dickheads on the internet and ruin it for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, like the whole Thelema thing was like, I'm not a joiner, so like I've never had to one time I joined the Golden Dawn and stayed there for a while, and then I had conversations with people. I got to leave, it's like this is not doing anything for me. It's like it seems like I can sit here and stack up, degrees, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to I'm seeking something, and getting degrees is not doing it for me.
Yeah,
and the intelligent people like Hyatt were like, yeah, you need to move on. Go ahead. My blessing, we're still friends. That's all I needed. I just didn't want to piss anybody off. It's like, it reminds me of when I left Adobe, because I was like really tight with one of the founders and his family. And I felt bad. Like I'm going to leave this company that has treated me well. I've worked the one CEO I've ever worked for that I like, I admired all the way to his death. And
was that the Indian guy?
No, that's John Warnock, the guy who it created PostScript when he was at Xerox PARC.
So it was the Indian guy I keep calling him the Indian guy, but
he came later. So John Chuck Geschke founded Adobe, and then John retired. Chuck retired, and like they both eventually passed away. And then we went through a series of CEOs, and during that period, I realized like, oh, we're not going to get anybody like John because he was unique. He like actually treated his people like people, and he used to say that the number one asset of this company is not our code base, it's our people. And he treated us accordingly. So anyway, yeah, like when I decided to leave in '99 and like form my own company, I didn't want to insult him because I was friendly with him and his family, and so I'm like, this is going to be tricky. And so I went in and talked to him, and he said, well, I had to leave Xerox PARC to found this company, so I get it. Good luck. If you need anything from me, call me. Okay, cool. That was I thought he was going to be all butthurt because, they had just promoted me and like all this. I had like this beautiful office and a VP position and all this shit, and I felt like guilty. I was like, yeah, they did me good. They did good by me. They didn't mistreat me as an employee. Actually, it was the one place where I woke up in the morning, other than places I've owned now since. It's like the one place at that point in my life, I'd never had a job where I woke up in the morning and went, oh, cool, I get to go to work. I get to do cool shit. Like I never had that before. And so
now they're
and
now they're selling it. Have you seen the scandal with them recently?
I wouldn't want to work. I didn't want to work for him after John left. Like it started changing like right away.
Oh,
like,
you should see the
culture.
The latest thing is
drastically.
If you sign up for an Adobe account now, you've signed away any work you work on.
Now, I saw that. Yeah,
is now available for them to use to train their AI, and it's like, okay, that's a bit weird, but anyway.
Yeah, that's why I don't use the storage facilities, and I'll say this publicly, I've started to like find replacement applications for that suite.
I'm doing the same thing.
Move my way over, and when I feel comfortable in that one, I'm going to drop this one, and eventually, like by the end of the year, I plan on not being a Adobe subscriber at all, which is fine because, like I said, the reason I liked the company and I liked working there is because we had a CEO and a founder who was a uniquely humane person who believed that this is a company of hackers, and he hired hackers and he treated us like hackers. He let us. He knew that we were going to do the right thing. He just let us do what we wanted to do because he knew out of that he would get what he wanted, which is like unique, cool tools that would do unique, cool things for unique, cool people. Like he still agreed and adhered to the principle that like we were a creative company creating creative tools for creative people. And that has not been the case since he left.
No.
Which like right after he left, I left. I stayed around for maybe 6 months, and I'm like, fuck this. It's not going to be the same company. And he was like segueing out because he'd already announced his retirement. And I'm like, don't get mad, but I think I'm gone, dude. And he's like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I had to leave PARC. And I'm like, oh, cool. Glad you understand. Bye.